When Hollywood woke up to discover Rob Reiner and his wife Michele dead in their Brentwood mansion, nobody expected the twisted family connection that would emerge from the shadows. The legendary director behind The Princess Bride, the man who made millions cry with When Harry Met Sally, found with stab wounds alongside his beloved wife. But here's where this story takes a turn darker than any thriller he ever directed. Their daughter, Romy, walked into that home decorated for Christmas and discovered a scene straight out of a horror movie. And the suspect? Their own son, according to multiple insiders who've spoken to family members. This isn't just another Hollywood tragedy. This is a nightmare that's been building for decades behind mansion walls. Rob Reiner wasn't just any director. At 78, he had created an empire of iconic films that shaped American cinema. The Princess Bride, Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, Misery. Every single one a masterpiece, every single one beloved by millions. The son of comedy legend Carl Reiner, Rob grew up surrounded by greatness. Sid Caesar, Mel Brooks, Neil Simon. These weren't just names to him. These were family friends who shaped his understanding of entertainment. But what really launched Rob into stardom wasn't directing. It was playing Meathead on All in the Family, the groundbreaking Norman Lear sitcom that changed television forever. Rob beat out Richard Dreyfuss and Harrison Ford for that role. Let that sink in for a second. He was that talented, that magnetic, that undeniable. The twist that nobody saw coming happened on the set of When Harry Met Sally. Rob met Michele Singer, a photographer working on the film, and something clicked. She wasn't just beautiful, she wasn't just talented, she understood him in ways nobody else did. They married in 1989, and here's the crazy part. Michele actually convinced Rob to change the ending of the movie. Originally, Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan's characters weren't supposed to end up together, but Michele's love story with Rob was so powerful, so genuine, that Rob rewrote the ending. That's the kind of influence she had on him. That's the kind of partnership they shared for 36 years. Together, they built a family, had 3 children, Jake, Nick, and Romy, and Rob adopted Tracy from his first marriage to Penny Marshall. From the outside, everything looked perfect. A Hollywood power couple with an incredible family, massive success, and a legacy that would last forever. But nobody talks about what was happening behind closed doors with Nick. Born in 1993, Nick Reiner grew up as the grandson of comedy royalty. Carl Reiner's legacy, Rob Reiner's brilliance, the weight of that name crushing down on his shoulders from day one. By 15, Nick was already in his first rehab facility. 15 years old and already battling demons most people never face in a lifetime. The addiction didn't just knock on his door, it kicked it down and moved in permanently. Nick went through more than a dozen rehab stays. Read that again. More than a dozen attempts to get clean, to break free, to become the person his family desperately wanted him to be. But addiction doesn't care about your last name or your family's bank account. The streets became Nick's reality. Not the glamorous Hollywood streets lined with stars and red carpets. The actual cold, dangerous, unforgiving streets. Maine, New Jersey, Texas. Nick lived homeless in all 3 states. He slept outside, spent weeks without shelter, without safety, without hope. This wasn't some rebellious phase or a misguided adventure. This was survival mode. Nick himself admitted years later that he could have died out there. One wrong night, one bad decision, one dangerous encounter, and the story could have ended completely differently. But here's the thing about those dark years. Nick was choosing them. He told interviewers that when his family suggested rehab programs he didn't want to follow, he picked homelessness instead. Think about that choice. Think about the level of pain, confusion, and desperation required to choose living on the street over accepting help from one of Hollywood's wealthiest families. Rob and Michele didn't give up, though.
They kept fighting for their son, even when Nick pushed them away, even when addiction turned him into someone they barely recognized. In 2016, something shifted. Nick channeled all that pain, all those experiences, all those nearly fatal mistakes into a screenplay. Being Charlie was born from Nick's darkest moments, a semi-autobiographical film about addiction, recovery, and the impossible dance between parents trying to save their child and a child trying to save himself. And who directed it? Rob, his father, the man who'd watched his son spiral, who'd sent him to rehab over and over, who'd probably cried himself to sleep wondering where he went wrong. Rob directed his son's pain and put it on screen for the world to see. During press for the film, Nick opened up about his relationship with his dad. They didn't bond when Nick was a kid. Rob loved baseball, Nick loved basketball. Those differences seemed small, but they created distance, a canyon between father and son that grew wider as Nick's addiction took hold. But making Being Charlie together changed something. Nick saw his father's genius up close. Rob saw his son's heart and creativity. For a moment, maybe they both believed they'd turned a corner, that the worst was behind them, that family could heal all wounds. Nick even said he'd been home for a long time, that he'd gotten acclimated to being in LA and around his family again. He talked about meeting incredible people during his dark years, about drawing on those experiences for his art. It sounded like a recovery story with a happy ending.
Fast forward to Sunday afternoon, December 14th. The Brentwood mansion on Chadbourne Avenue, covered in Christmas decorations, lights twinkling in the California sun. Rob and Michelle's home, filled with memories of their 36 years together, photos of their children, awards lining the shelves, evidence of a life well lived and deeply loved. Around 3:30 p.m., someone called for help. Firefighters arrived first, then the LAPD. What they found inside that beautifully decorated home shattered any illusion of holiday peace. 2 bodies, lacerations consistent with a knife. Rob Reiner, 78 years old, a Hollywood legend. Michele Singer Reiner, 68 years old, his partner in everything. Both gone, both taken violently, both discovered by their daughter Romy, who will never unsee what she walked into that day. The LAPD's Robbery-Homicide Division took over immediately. Deputy Chief Alan Hamilton faced cameras that night looking grim. "No suspect identified yet," he said. "Nobody in custody." But detectives were interviewing family members, and here's where the story gets even more twisted. Multiple sources started talking to People magazine, not official police sources, but people who'd spoken directly with family members, and the name they whispered was Nick Reiner, the son, the one who'd battled addiction for nearly 2 decades, the one who'd lived on the streets, the one who'd written about his pain and collaborated with his father to turn it into art. Now, allegedly, the one who ended both his parents' lives with a knife. No forced entry at the scene. Think about what that means. Whoever did this didn't break in. They were either let inside or already had access. The Christmas decorations still up, the holiday joy frozen in time. Neighbors reported seeing Billy Crystal and Larry David arrive after police showed up. Billy, who'd starred in When Harry Met Sally, the film where Rob met Michelle. Billy looked like he was about to cry, one neighbor said. Can you imagine? Your best friend, your collaborator, someone you've known for decades, gone like that, and you show up to a crime scene instead of a holiday party.
The entertainment world exploded with grief. Barack Obama tweeted about losing a friend and a creative genius. Kamala Harris called Rob and Michelle dear friends, praised Rob's fight for democracy and social justice. California Governor Gavin Newsom said Rob's boundless empathy made his stories timeless. Mayor Karen Bass called it a devastating loss for the city and country. Kathy Bates, who starred in Misery, said she was horrified and devastated. Rob changed the course of her life. Michelle photographed her for the Misery campaign. Norman Lear's family released a statement saying the world was unmistakably darker.
All these powerful people, all these industry legends, all mourning not just a director, but a friend, an activist, a voice for justice who used his platform to fight for what he believed in. But while Hollywood mourned, investigators worked. The Reiners owned two houses across the street from each other. Rob and Michele in one, their daughter with her kids in the other. They were a big presence on the block, neighbors said, always having parties, always bringing life and energy to the neighborhood. Now that energy was gone, replaced by crime scene tape and investigators combing through every detail. Police stressed they weren't looking for anyone else, they weren't seeking suspects, they weren't chasing anyone through Brentwood, which meant one thing. They believed whoever did this was already within their circle, already known, already part of the family story. Nick's history suddenly became relevant in ways nobody wanted to discuss publicly. The addiction, the homelessness, the dozen-plus rehab attempts, the fraught relationship with his father. Nick once said they didn't bond much as kids, even after making Being Charlie together, even after that creative collaboration brought them closer. How deep did those wounds really go? Addiction doesn't just hurt the person struggling with it, it damages everyone around them. Parents who've tried everything and watched it fail. Siblings who've lost the brother they once knew. Families that reorganize their entire lives around one person's chaos. And sometimes, in the darkest cases, that damage becomes irreversible.
Rob was politically outspoken, a fierce activist who regularly blasted Donald Trump on social media. He co-founded the American Foundation for Equal Rights, fighting to overturn California's ban on same-sex marriage. He pushed for early childhood development programs. He was one of the voices urging Joe Biden to step aside for Kamala Harris in 2024. Rob used his platform, his money, his influence to fight for causes he believed in. Michele stood beside him through all of it, not just as a wife, but as a partner, producer, photographer, and activist in her own right. Together, they built something bigger than movies. They built a legacy of fighting for justice, for equality, for making the world better than they found it. Now, that legacy ends in blood on a Brentwood floor. Rob had one final project completed, according to his IMDb page. Live concert footage of Spinal Tap performing at Stonehenge with other massive names in music. This is Spinal Tap, his 1984 mockumentary that changed comedy forever, had just gotten a sequel in 2025. Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues. Rob was still creating, still making people laugh, still finding new ways to tell stories. At 78, he wasn't slowing down, he wasn't retiring. He was doing what he loved with the woman he loved, until someone took that away forever. Tracy Reiner, Rob's adopted daughter from his marriage to Penny Marshall, told reporters she'd just seen her father the day before for a family gathering. Just one day earlier, everything was normal. They were together, celebrating, being a family. Tracy said she came from the greatest family ever, past tense, because in one afternoon, that family was shattered. Jake Reiner, the son who became a television reporter instead of following the family business, now faces reporters asking about his parents' murder instead of doing his job. Romy, who discovered her parents' bodies, will carry that image forever. And Nick, allegedly the one who caused all this pain, faces a future nobody could have imagined when his parents named him.
The investigation continues. The LAPD hasn't officially named Nick as a suspect. They haven't made any arrests. They're still interviewing family members, still gathering evidence, still building their case. But the sources who spoke to people were clear. Multiple sources, people who'd talked directly to family members, all pointing in the same direction, all saying the same name. The mansion remains a crime scene. The holiday decorations a cruel reminder of what should have been. A family together, a celebration of another year, love and laughter filling those rooms, instead of investigators documenting violence. This story has everything Hollywood loves to avoid: a legendary director murdered, a family torn apart by addiction's long-term consequences, a son who survived streets and rehab only to allegedly destroy the parents who never stopped fighting for him. There's no happy ending here, no third-act redemption, no uplifting message about family conquering all obstacles. Just tragedy. Raw, brutal, senseless tragedy, playing out in one of LA's wealthiest neighborhoods while Christmas lights blinked on outside. Rob Reiner gave the world stories about friendship, love, standing up for what's right, and finding connection in unexpected places. Stand By Me taught us about loyalty. The Princess Bride showed us true love conquers all. When Harry Met Sally proved men and women could be friends, and maybe something more. A Few Good Men demanded we handle the truth. Misery explored obsession and survival. Every film carried weight, meaning, and heart. Rob understood human nature. He understood what makes us laugh, cry, and feel deeply. But maybe he couldn't understand his own son. Maybe nobody could. Maybe some demons run too deep for even the greatest storytellers to defeat.
Michele Singer Reiner, who once photographed Donald Trump for the Art of the Deal cover, who convinced her husband to give When Harry Met Sally its iconic happy ending, who raised 3 children and stood by Rob through decades of Hollywood chaos, deserved better than this. She deserved to grow old with the man she loved, to see more grandchildren, to take more photographs, to continue fighting for the causes she believed in. Instead, her life ended violently in the home she'd made beautiful during a season meant for joy. The Hollywood community will remember Rob Reiner as a genius, the man who could do comedy, drama, romance, and thriller with equal skill, the activist who never shut up about justice even when it hurt his career, the son of Carl Reiner, who not only lived up to his father's legacy, but created his own. But beneath all those accomplishments, all those awards, all that success, Rob was just a father who loved his son. A father who directed that son's pain into art. A father who probably thought, after being Charlie, that they'd finally found their way back to each other. And now that father is gone, along with the wife who stood beside him through everything, leaving behind questions nobody wants to answer, and a family destroyed by the very darkness they'd tried so hard to overcome.